Yeah, we're live. It's 10:21. Today it's all about Ford versus Chevy, Windsor versus LS. And I know right off the bat, there, there are going to be those out there that want to go down this conspiracy theory trail and or route. And I know that that's the case because I've actually had people get like fairly irate and militant about asking. I mean, and somehow thinking that I'm part of the Illuminati or the Pentaveret or whatever in the automotive industry. I remember being on, I was on an interview with somebody, and there were 4 or 5 different people. We were all talking, about different car guy stuff, which is pretty normal. But one of the guys was like, "Yeah, what about the Ford? What are your thoughts on the Ford copying the or the LS copying the Ford? Just that LS motor is basically just a Windsor." And I'm like, well, and I hadn't heard that conspiracy theory before because I don't get involved in any of that. Not only was this guy adamant that this actually happened, that this was a real thing, but that also I was somehow involved in that the powers that be in, I don't know, Dearborn or wherever, somehow confide in me and say, hey, Richard, shh, don't say anything. Okay, don't say anything about this. But like, here's the inside scoop. This is a real thing. And I'm like, look, dude. First of all, you need to settle down. Just in general, you need to settle down because that's not a good idea for you. The second thing is you're assuming that I even knew about this, that I knew that this is a thing. And then you're also going beyond that. You're assuming that I'm somehow to blame or involved or I'm conspiring to make this like a thing. I'm like, none of that is true. I didn't even know about this thing. I don't know why anybody would be worried about that. The only thing that the vast majority of people that I've talked to that go down this road, a lot of times they're like diehard Ford guys, which is fantastic. Hey, 5-liter Mustang original owner. I've had a number of Fords, a 65 Mustang GT. So and a number of 5-liter Mustangs. So and this is how they differentiate. Oh, you must be a Ford guy, or you must be a Chevy guy. I'm like, none of that is a thing. I'm a Dino guy. But if you say something, and this is the way it is with politics or religion or anything, if you say something, even if it's true, if you say something that points out a possible flaw in the thing that they hold near and dear, you must be the enemy. You must be the other guy. I'm like, look, dude, I didn't even know that this was a thing. But it seems to me that the people that are saying, oh, the LS is just a copy of a 5-liter, we should get as Ford guys, we should get all the credit for the LS, for the popularity and success, and all the great things that are happening with all this LS stuff. Oh, that's just Ford. No, it's not. And I don't know why you have to worry about taking credit for that. But one of the things and one of the other arguments that people, this road that people go down is that the 351 makes the same power as an LS. Well, so we're going to talk about that a little bit because I don't think that that's reality. And it doesn't matter to me. This isn't a situation where I like one more than the other. Like I said, I'm a Mustang guy, and I think a 351 is a so much better of a choice for a motor for a Mustang than a 302 is. I think it's a way better way to go just because it's bigger. That's all that I care about. It's bigger. It has the potential to make more power because it's bigger. It's going to make a lot more torque than a 302. It's just a better choice. Now, if you could find a way to have an aluminum one, that would be better. And that's why looking at an LS for a Fox or any kind of Ford product, that's what makes it so attractive. We can go to a wrecking yard and really get an aluminum 5.3. Now, it's not quite as big as a 5.8, but get a 5.3 all aluminum motor. So it's lightweight and makes more power. And if we do a comparison of a 351 like EFI motor versus an LS, first of all, the LS came out later. I mean, almost a decade later. And so it's not surprising that it's going to be better, and it's better in every way. I mean, if you look at if you start off with the base numbers on a EFI 351 Windsor and even a 5.7 LS1, so you're comparing a 5.7 to a 5.8. Now you could compare the 5.3 if you want, and that's fine too. But even a 5.3 makes a good, well, one of them is rated at between 285 and 300 horsepower, and that's the 5.3. The 5.7 was rated at 345 on the LS side. A 351 Windsor in a truck, because that's where you're going to find it, was like 210. So it's not even close. It's not even in the same ballpark. It's a hundred. If you compare to a 351 Windsor to a 5.7 LS1, it's 100 plus horsepower behind that, just starting out. Oh, okay, well, yeah, but that's, the Ford guys are like, I get to be the Ford guy and I get to be the LS guy and argue with myself, which I do very often. So if you take a look at the starting point, you're like, okay, yeah, that's stock. Well, one's a truck motor, one's a performance motor, but even on the truck, a 4.8 makes more than a 5.8 does. It makes more power. It's not going to probably make the torque, but I bet it would be close. It'd be interesting for me to compare that, a 4.8 versus a 5.8. But if you look at the power outputs of these things, starting out, it's like not even close. Okay, well, starting out, stock for stock, yeah, obviously one's better than the other. Okay, well, that's a big margin to make up. How are you going to make up that deficit? Oh, well, if you ran good heads and cam and intake on both of them, then it would make it up. But it doesn't do that. If you take a 351 and put heads on it, airflow research heads, and some kind of good intake manifold, either a carbureted intake manifold or some sort of EFI intake manifold. Unfortunately for us, there's not anything for a 351 Windsor that does for that combination like what a fast manifold does for a cathedral port LS. Because that's probably the one that I would pick to compare it to. You can put high rams on both of them since those are available. And then the amount of camshaft that you could put in them. But let's say we put a 230-ish cam in both of them. So you put airflow research heads on the 351, put a 230 camshaft in it, put some kind of intake manifold on. It's not going to make what a 5.7 LS1 does. It's still going to be down. Now, it will have made up a lot of the deficit. And that's because the 351 Windsor from the factory has cylinder heads that are terrible. I mean, they flow 70, 80 CFM less than a LS head does. So right off the bat, I mean, there are other things too. The LS has a factory windage tray. It has a way better intake manifold, even the factory stuff. But if you look at the LS1 intake manifold is still way better than any 351 intake manifold. The LS6 even better still. The truck manifold, obviously, all of those are better. But just building the motor up the way that you would normally, the 351 doesn't ever catch the LS for the vast majority of us guys. Now you could when you take a motor of a given displacement and then you apply like NASCAR technology to it, yes, you can make lots and lots of power. And you could put, canted valve heads on it and do all kinds of crazy stuff and make a bajillion horsepower. That's all possible. And I think that for a lot of guys, they look at that, oh, look, it makes whatever 850, 900 horsepower, whatever, when they did cup motors, it makes that much power. Okay, that's great. But that's not you. You're not doing that. You're not doing that because of ability and understanding as much as expense. Because a guy putting together, if you wanted to build a cup motor, it would be way cheaper for you just to buy an 8 or 10-year-old one, whenever they just get rid of them all, to do that and have that motor. But that motor wouldn't be any kind of like daily driver thing. So if we stay in the realm of reality, talking about, any sort of real comparison, we can go to a wrecking yard, we get one of these motors out of the wrecking yard, we run it. I've run lots of these 351 Windsors. They're like 260 when we run them with headers on the engine dyno. And when we run a 5.3, it's 330, or if we run a 5.3, it's 350. So it's almost 100 horsepower just with a 5.3, and a 5.7 makes even more. So they're not the same. We are not the same. They are not the same. And like I said, if you put good heads at cam and intake manifold on the 351, it makes up some of that ground, but not all of the ground. And so for the vast majority of us, this is why that later, more technologically advanced motors are better. And the same thing I think could be argued with an LT version. If you look at an L83 and the potential for an L83, it's more than the LS is. You have to get through all the complexity of direct injection and all that. But we're all learning that stuff, and so that's not that big a deal. As time and technology march on, they get better. Looking back and go, oh, these were just as good. That's almost never the case, and nor should it be. We're not. I mean, would we go back and go, hey, the same displacement flathead Ford makes the same power that they make now? They don't do that. A flathead Ford and a Coyote, they're not the same. They do not do the same thing. That doesn't make it any less cool, because we're not judging these things solely on, hey, what's the potential, what's the power output, what's the normal kind of power output. And for me, that's why when I did all these videos of different cylinder heads and stuff, what I'm showing people more is, hey, look, when we put this combination together, this will give you an idea what kind of power they can make. So if you're putting something together, this is kind of what you're going to expect. All right, I love the guys that chime in with comments. Oh, mine makes a lot more. Like, oh, that's great. It's not a competition. And this wasn't an engine building like exercise so that we could see who makes the most power. This was, hey, look, if you put this head and this cam and this intake manifold and the carburetor and you tune it, this is kind of what you're going to expect. So if we made 450 on this combination and you make 350, then hey, look, maybe I got 2 plug wires that are off, because this is, Richards has tested this a bunch of times, and this tells me kind of where we should be, gives you a good guide. This is why, for the same reason that I run NA stuff before we add boost to it, so that I know what that multiplier is. If we don't run an NA and we just put the turbo on there and it makes 800 horsepower, is that good? Is that what it should be doing? Not if the NA motor, not if we're running like 14 or 15 pounds and the NA motor made 500 and we're at 800 with boost. Something's going on. So the more information that you have, obviously, the better on that stuff. And in these kinds of comparisons, I know that you want your favorite thing to do, the thing that you align yourself with. I know that you want that to do well, and in order to do that, we got to obviously put down the other thing. But we shouldn't be doing that, because it's in time and technology march on, and that's why that's one of the reasons that the LS is so popular. And for me, even if they were the same, if we could make the same power out of a 351 Windsor as we could out of an LS, you don't have the available aluminum 351 unless you buy a really expensive aftermarket aluminum block. But you could just go get an aluminum version of an LS from the wrecking yard, and we know what, just like that low buck truck camshaft that I have, that you put the low buck truck camshaft in it and you have 400 to 425 horsepower, somewhere around there. That's a good amount with just a camshaft, and now you have a 425 horsepower all aluminum race motor, and that's why they're continue to be popular, because they're available in the wrecking yards and they make lots of power. We're start a poll. Would you pick a Ford 351 Windsor over an LS for a swap in your Ford vehicle? So if you got a Ford vehicle and you're going to swap something in it, would you pick the Windsor or would you pick the LS? Prestige. Should I try and bolt LV3 heads on my Ford 300? Yeah, there's going to be some cutting and welding there, but yes. But you're not going to run it port injected, right? I mean, not going to run it direct injected. I always heard that the Godzilla is a big LS. If I was a Ford guy, I would be flattered. If it was real, I would say, why not? L33 for the win. Exactly. LC9, all of those are really good. Cleveland is the best choice. There you go. Did you see the 6-stroke engine pattern the Porsche did? I did. I just saw a brief thing on it, but I haven't read into it yet. Just compare the E70E versus the 706 heads. Yeah, it's a lot. It's one of them flows 150 to 160. The other one is 220, 230. So it's a lot. Plus, you don't need to buy heads for the LS. No, you don't. If you just putting a camshaft in it to get, if you had a 351 Windsor and you wanted to make 425 horsepower like you could with a 5.3, just putting a camshaft and springs in it, you would need injectors too. But you'd need injectors in the Windsor too if you're keeping it fuel injected. In order to do that, you'd have to have heads, cam, and intake manifold on the 351. Chevy chose to step up the cylinder head. They did, and Coyote did too. And even before that, the modular Ford program, particularly the 4-valve stuff, had much better flowing heads. If I see 4,500 on the street, I've got bigger issues. The best engine family is the most recent. It stands on the shoulders of everything that came before it. Yep, we get better and better, right? People should be doing that too. Just like when I look at Rosie O'Donnell, a different opinion. Claudia, you're comparing Rosie O'Donnell and Claudia Schiffer. Which is better, LS or a Dodge Hemi? And get the popcorn ready. Yeah, they're both good. That was easy, right? Did you eat some popcorn though while I said it? Because that would be important. LS versus small block Chevy versus Windsor, same level heads, mostly the same, but LS has larger cam base circle than Ford, and Chevy is the smallest, makes a difference. I see. I disagree with that. I don't think you can do that. I don't think if you, like I talked about, I don't think if you put heads, cam, and intake manifold on those motors that they make as much as an LS does. Put on GV2 heads intake on the Windsor. Stock Windsor heads do not compare. What's a GV2? What about the Boss 351? Does that close the gap more than the LS? Yeah, a Boss 351, the one that I tested, actually made 380. So it would be closer in power to a 5.7 LS1. .302 Windsor math calibrating for 80-pound injector. Is this moot with a Holly? Yeah, you don't need a mass air meter. You don't even have to have a mass air meter if you're running a standalone. In fact, I don't think that the Holly will, I don't know if it'll accept a mass air reading or not. Maybe it will, but it's not needed because you could run at speed density. And then the mass air would just be essentially, if it's a radius air entry, it would work fine as that. If it was a Mustang, I'd go with an LS. Depends on the vehicle. Define the intended purpose flat out. Or nostalgia. Obviously, all that stuff would have a lot to do with it as well. Not just the power, because that's. I don't think that that's a good way to determine what combination you should use. As much as I am a dyno guy, and this is a dyno channel, I don't think that answers every question. Like when we talk about camshafts, which one makes the most power? Well, that's probably not the one that I would pick. I have two cams. I have the low buck truck camshaft and the Truck Plus. The Truck Plus makes more power, but I recommend and sell the low buck truck, I don't know, 5 or 10 or 20 to 1 compared to the bigger cam. And that's because it makes power in the RPM range that the vast majority of the people use. I like Hemis. I like Hemis too. I think that they're an awful lot like an LS. They have really good intake manifolds, and they have really good cylinder heads, and they're just in need of a camshaft. They have enough displacement. They have enough compression. They have really good stuff. A Glidden Victor head. Oh yeah, that's good stuff. If you live in California, you can't swap either LS or a 351 motors legally onto a smog controlled vehicle. You can, you just have to go through a ref station. And if you swapped it in, you would have to swap all the things in from the correct vehicle. And the problem is, I don't think that they allow you to put I'd have to ask Mark. I can't remember which way it went. I don't know if you can't. I don't think you could put a truck engine into a car or a car engine into a truck. They, I think they allow you to go one way, but not the other way in California. One thing the LS struggles to do is make TPI torque. Mean like at 2000 or 2500 or something. Calibrated maths are somewhat of a scam in themselves because they throw off the load calc of the factory computer. I always had really good luck with our Pro M stuff back in the day. Yes, they're the same. They're both air pumps. Yeah, but when you add a boost, you made 1,000 horsepower with 351. So when you're talking about what you can do without getting deep into it, I think the 351 would be just as good. If your goal was 1,000 horsepower and you put 1,000 horsepower turbo on it, and then you started with 100 horsepower less with a 351 than you would with an LS, it just means that you have to raise the boost. So both of them could get there that way. Bring on a big block, a new gen Hemi. I'm not saying that isn't deep into it, but the stock internals, etc. Yeah, no, you can make good power with those. If you take a 351 Windsor, put ring gap in it, put heads, cam, and intake manifolds on it, and then put boost on it, obviously good things can happen. You're allowed to put a car engine into a truck, but not a truck engine into a car. Okay, trucks are less regulated than regular passenger cars, especially anything that's 8,800 gross vehicle weight and higher. That's too bad because all of the swaps that you see, almost all of the LS stuff, because of the availability of the truck engines 4853 and 60s, that they made 100 or 1,000 to 1 compared to the car engines. All of those are the ones that guys are taking out and swapping into stuff. They're taking truck motors out and putting them in cars or other trucks. Want to buy a Dart aluminum 351 block. Those are good. Build it for high RPM NA street legal setup for my 05 Mustang GT. It's an automatic and I want a T5. I don't know if your definition of street legal is the same as emissions legal. The only thing preventing me from joining the LS community is my Mopar religion acolyte status. It'll never change. There's nothing wrong with Mopar stuff. Mopar is good stuff. I am a Mopar owner. Ghost, you got to be more specific about what you're trying to do. I don't know what you mean by high RPM NA street legal setup. You got to give me a definition of that. Tell me what kind of power you want to make, what kind of displacement you want to run, and all of that. I have 408 Windsor stuff up, and you could do that with a Dart aluminum block. You can't put a truck engine over a certain GVW into a passenger vehicle. Yeah. I was today years old when I discovered that there was an AMC Eagle two-door convertible, apparently called the Sundancer. I see, that's news to me too. I didn't know that they did a convertible. LS power in the hands of people. LS puts power in the hands of people, especially with super richy Finky mods on them. What's a Finky mod? It doesn't count as Mopar, does it? It does. It's the best one. 650-ish horsepower and up, NA horsepower, street emissions legal on pump gas. That's not going to happen. You won't make 650 NA horsepower in any sort of emissions legal form. Because 650 NA would be like a 408, but it's going to be a 408 with a really big cam and fairly high compression and like a single plane intake manifold and all the stuff that are not going to be emissions legal. Or just made me convert from I love revs to force induction. Both of those are good. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with having boost and RPM, which a lot of the racers that are doing LS stuff, they're doing that because they know that if they run more engine speed, that they're going to get there quicker. Getaway, you're camping louder than life. There are trucks that are considered passenger vehicles. For instance, you could put an F-150 truck engine in a car, but not an F-350. Okay. So they go by GVW then, right? Finky is like funky, but more complex and clever. I like that. I'm going to tell my wife that I'm Finky. I'm more complex and clever. As much as I know the LT is more modern, more powerful, I'll always stick with Ford power in my Ford car. It's the same as Olds Power 442. If I owned a Chevy, it would definitely have an LS. Yeah, and you can stay with, you could stay with brand loyalty and stuff. I have more horsepower from Timu. They do have good costs on stuff. Now you can make that power output emissions legal probably with boost. Like I don't know if Vortec or ProCharger or any of those guys have like an emissions legal blowers that you could do that with, because then you could put maybe there are emissions legal heads and a camshaft and stuff that you could do, and then add the emissions legal blower. You might be able to call, because I've been talking about doing this for a decade now or more, but I wanted to do my legal Eagle build up, and we were going to do it with a 302 Ford. Putting emissions legal heads on electric flow stuff, an emissions legal cam, which back in the day, the Crane 2040 or the E303 was emissions legal. I don't know if it still is. Some sort of emissions legal intake manifold, and then a emissions legal blower, and all that stuff together would be good power. The LS platform is the best engine family for many reasons, including beyond horsepower. I have issue with the best. Moved to Arizona, and any other plans for LT1 350? Wouldn't mind seeing you converted TPI intake test on it. I won't run that TPI. That one wasn't mine anyways. I sent that back to Jim, but I do have more testing coming on the Gen 2 LT1. A true car guy should like lots of different brands, like Chevy, Dodge, Ford. Have you ever tested the Edelbrock 351 EFI truck intake manifold? I don't think so. I think he applies some clever and secret mods others have not explored much, like David Vizard. I want to keep the weight down in my 2005 GT. You could go get a wrecking yard LS and do that. I'm a dire Ford guy, but the LS is a compelling argument. Not everyone wants to buy $2,500 heads just to get close to stock LS. That's part of the problem, that having to upgrade the cylinder heads is a big thing. It's not cheap. Another good thing is that about the LS is that someone has already done or swapped it in some kind of combo that you're looking at. It's true. And somebody has dyno tested some combination that's going to be close to what you're doing, if not exact. LS versus small block Ford budget target of 400 foot-pounds by 3,500 NA, just a cam for a 5.3. I don't know if, let's see if we got 400 there. This is why having the dyno results here is really good. Let's see. 3,500, we were at 390 foot-pounds with a cammed 5.3. We might be able to get it was at 400 at 3,800. We might be able to finagle that around with something else, maybe different headers or that kind of thing. You speak heresy. This true car guy is an acolyte in the temple of Ma Mopar. An Omni GLHS is Mopar. It's all Mopar. Currently prepping to swap my 302 to a 408 stroker 351. That'll be cool. Ranger Danger. I recently learned that they made Pontiac 6,000 cars in all-wheel drive. Never heard of that. They did? That's cool. What motor did it have? Did it have a little 2.2 or something in it? Is the GLH 2.2 a DSM? It's not. It's Dodge. Any flow numbers for 90 small block Ford truck stock manifold? I don't remember flow testing a lot of manifolds because I wasn't as concerned with the flow numbers as I was with the power outputs. Can an LSA supercharger be used in a legal install on another engine other than a ZL1 vehicle, Santa Fe 3? No, that it wouldn't technically be legal to put that blower on a 5.3. There's no reason that you couldn't do that if you put all the factory stuff on there and then maybe go through a ref station and convince them. But otherwise, it wouldn't be. You could swap the whole motor in maybe, and engine and trans and calibration. But then a lot of times they're very particular that they want everything, like all of the vent lines, and if it has smog pumps and filters and canisters and all of that stuff. It's a lot. What are good cheap set of LS injectors for 500 NA crank horsepower? If you can find some flex fuel ones, I think that those will get you there. 500. So if we divide 500 by 16, that's 31 pound injectors. So I don't know what size the flex fuel injectors are. I'm always concerned about worsening emissions from the engine if I open up the ring gap on a stock. You're concerned about that? Do you have cats on your car that would take care of that? Richard, name another engine family that has small packaging mask. Mr. Rockwell, you're missing the point of the conversation. You get to have your opinion about the thing that you like the best. But if I like Chevy Sprint turbo motors, it doesn't make any difference what kind of case you're trying to make for an LS. And you're talking to a guy who has a channel that caters to LS stuff. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't be open-minded about other people having your same opinion about other things. Trying to make a case that because you want your opinion of it being the best doesn't work, because that's just an opinion. And so that's what I'm getting at. Convince me that a 2J is not good. Convince me that an RB is not good, or a turbo rotary. All those things are fantastic. Or that a small block Ford, or that a V10 or modular Ford, or all of those things. You won't be able to convince me that those are not great. Do you ever test the sloppy best cam anymore? Yeah, it didn't ever stop not being a good cam. It does what it does. And if you want that, then it does that. Truck manifold is closer to a GT40 setup than the HO. I would like to test that. I want to test the Ford 302 truck manifold, and then also the 351. Swap parts add up quickly. It might be cheaper to upgrade the platform that you have. Won't make as much power as the swap options listed, but probably enough to do burnouts. It will. And when we talk about that stuff, that's usually my recommendation. If you already have a motor, a lot of times upgrading that motor is a better way to go. You already have everything. You already have the exhaust for it. You already have if it's EFI or if it's carbureted, whatever it is, you already have a lot of that stuff to make it work. And so putting heads on it and cam. And the other thing that is that if you're doing those upgrades, you can do them as your budget allows. So, okay, this month or this 6 months or whatever you're saving up for, however long it takes, I can do the camshaft and springs. Okay, then I could maybe do the cylinder heads or maybe the intake manifold. Decide on what order that you want to put all that stuff in. Then you can do that. And that's a good way to go, rather than go, okay, now I'm going to swap an LS. Okay, well, I can afford to go get a $300 or $400 from the wrecking yard LS motor, but now I also got to get a transmission and a clutch and the swap kit to put it in and accessory drive, and all of those things add up. And what happens is if you take your motor out while you're getting all those things, that wouldn't really be the way to go. It'd be much better to get all the stuff and then do the swap all at once. But you're still having to spend a lot of money, whereas you could do upgrades and then still be driving your car. Because if you go to put a camshaft in it, that might be a day or two or whatever that is down while you're doing that cam swap, but then you're driving it. If you take the engine out while you're doing the swap, then the thing just sits there as yet another project car. That's not going to be a good deal. Scrolling. As a Ford guy, I look for a used 351 Windsor for years. That isn't insanely overpriced. My Falcon has an LS now. If I'm getting a 351 Windsor, I try to get the hydraulic roller versions just because it's just a better cam. I'm at low end torque when comparing TPI torque to an LS. My Gen 2 TPI converted Gen 2 LT1 makes great torque for my Suburban. So you have an LT1 that you've put a tune port manifold on? Like the one that we did on the L99? Cadillac Supercharger, junkyard, or eBay. I've never seen one at the junkyard. I've never seen one of those Cadillac Superchargers there. I have seen some Range Rovers or Jaguar Superchargers there, but I've never seen a Cadillac one. I don't think because if we saw a Cadillac that had the supercharged motor there, we would get the whole motor. Eric, you're getting all the ads. The ads are getting out of hand. Now YouTube gives you ads if you pause a video? That seems weird. I like the sound of an RB. I know, I'm excited about eventually ever running that motor. Pontiac 6000 STE came with a 3.1 liter V6. I was just reading an article saying that the rear diff was borrowed from a GMT 400. And the center diff could be locked with a switch on the dash. Wow, I didn't know that they did the all-wheel drive stuff. I want the vehicle to pass after I remove the turbo. Okay. What's the most you'd push? A stock block 351 Windsor forged bottom end with a centrifugal blower. I don't know what blower you're putting on there, but we've done more than 1,000 horsepower with those things. So a stock bottom end with ring gap on a 351 will actually go a long ways. Do your own research. I don't know too much about it. Okay, yeah, I'll look into it. I mean, it's not something I would ever want to get. I just didn't know that they did an all-wheel drive version of that. If money were no option, I would want a Yates-headed 420-something Ford, but budget allows for an L8T build for $2,000. Let's see. I don't want to swap the motor to pass. I understand that people put different brands of engines in their cars. I would put a small block Mopar in a Ford Maverick just to make people mad. That's the motivation for your swap. Would the Truck Norris cam, and Chuck Norris doesn't make cams, but would the Truck Norris cam be all right on a 3-stroke or LS for street use? Yeah, it would work fine. Love the sound and average horsepower and torque. It would be good. It's not going to make a lot of, power on the big end on a 383, but it would be very good. That's a good cam. Not related, but just sold my 89 Notch. Heads cam Novi, owned it for 20 years, got good money for it, but have regrets already. I know those things are getting to be money. 1989, the Pontiac became General Motors, first General Motors passenger car to offer an all-wheel drive system. Wow. I'm open-minded. I don't own any LSs. Yes, all those are good. We're in agreement. This medium doesn't allow for me to have a comprehensive explanation for your thoughts. Yeah, it is limited in don't they limit character count or something? Neil, what's going on? I voted no as a UK viewer. I can't see any advantage to an LS is cheaper and more supported. My basically stock 351 powered 73 Torino pump gas runs 740s in the eighth. Is your 73 a Cleveland or is it a Windsor? You need to get RB testing done. I know, so I can put it in the Z. Lots of 351s at the junkyards. I don't see a ton of them, but we do see some there. I like to see the big dogs ported Ford manifold stuff. I'd like to test those too. I've got an HO manifold on the shelf that flows 230 CFM. Curious how the stock runner length would play going in an 88. The stock runner length is still going to want to make power in that RPM range. Unless they've shortened the runner length, it's not going to dramatically, it's not going to change the reflective wave. So it's still going to be in that range. But I'd like to see if how much more power they make. We did a lot of testing back in the day with the guys from Extrudone, and even went to the extra effort of porting individual ports so that we could get the same flow rate. Now, runners 1 and 5, we call whatever the two front runners are longer because of the way that they have to snake around the distributor. So even though we got the same flow rate, those runners are going to make different power curves than the other ones do because of the runner length. The best is a Pontiac V8 swapped into a Corvette. You do a 24-second eighth mile. Don't zero gap rings have an issue with boost? I don't know that they would, because they actually have gap. It's just that they overlap. They have expansion ability, which is the thing. They don't have zero gap and they're butted together. They're overlapped. So, and they have little slots on them. So the rings can still expand and not have a problem. I've never run zero gap rings with boost. And I could talk to Lake about that and see if they run those on boosted applications. I'm sure he does. Do a sideways front 5.3 front driver from Monte Carlo. The survey is misleading for Chevy guys. Would you pick a Ford 35110 over an LS for a swap in your Ford vehicle? Why is it misleading for Chevy guys? If I get absolutely filthy rich, I'm buying a mint condition JDM Nissan Turbo Z car and swapping in a 22R. Okay. So are you going to buy it? Are you talking about like a 280ZX turbo? Seen someone put a Coyote in a 67 Camaro and he got hate. We saw the guys out at the Silver State had tri-power FE motors in 3 different Chevy cars, a Camaro and an El Camino, and I think a Chevelle. And they were I thought, dude, this is awesome. It's not the route I would have chosen, but this is what they had, and that's what they put in there. Does the LS have vibration acoustic issues? In Australia, they sound drony and don't rev. Do you need them to rev higher? They're not high RPM motors from the factory because they're big and they don't need to run a lot of RPM. But they will rev if you put, cams and springs on them. It's a Windsor and a factory engine in it. I was told it's very rare. In 73, okay. C6 and a 9-inch. A set of spinners on a Ferrari GTO. car was also black, and that was a special order. There's a cheaper way to make the 351 Windsor run LS coils. It would be nice. Why do you want coil packs on the 351? Just because you think it'll look cool? I have a 351 Windsor and a Ford truck. I have the Edelbrock EFI truck intake manifold, BBK twin throttle body. Which should I choose, and what size injector do you suggest? If you're trying to make more power, the 19-pound injectors are only going to support like 300 horsepower or something, if I remember right. 19 times. Yeah. They're only 300 and or very low 300s. 24s are usually the ones that we pick for 400 or thereabouts. If you have the ability to tune it, you could put in whatever size injector that you want. I always like going bigger on the injector because that way, if you want to add boost later on, you have enough to do it. But the injector size just needs to be sized enough to, and plus some, to feed the power level that you have. Don't worry about an injector being big and causing a bad idle or whatever. If you're tuning it, all of that is fixed. Tuning a 351 is like dumping fuel off a mountain. I was so annoyed. My 5.7 LS only made 478 of the tire. I found out the lifters were hurt. You thought your 5.7 LS should make more than 478 of the tires? We tried the overlapping total seal rings on a Cause or a 2-liter motor. The ringland broke on a piston. Could be just bad luck. I've only ever run them on one motor, and I didn't do a test to see if it really changed anything. Down in Australia, the V8 Super car, are restricted to 5 liters. Yeah, those are cool motors. There's a lot of technology that goes in. Those things make a lot of power. What's impressive with non-standard engine swaps when people make fabricated all 100% nothing bought from Holly or other sources. So you have more respect for somebody having to make the stuff to make the engine swap? When spin to win junkyard 351 Windsor roller, what size lug for the crankshaft? Are you asking what the damper bolt size is on a 302 Windsor? It's 15/16. Bought a new LS3 430. Hidden cost for accessories really add up. Put it in my Ranger with 410s. Crazy torque, really impressive. Yeah, the LS swap, unless you put all the stock stuff in that it came with from the wrecking yard, can get pricey. More clearance for fab intakes, blowers. What's the formula I'm using for injectors? If you multiply for a V8, if you multiply the flow rate of the injector, like 19 pounds or 24 pounds or 50 pounds or whatever the injector size is, if you multiply that times 16, that gives you an idea of how much power those injectors on a V8 will support. I was hoping and dreaming for 500, but hopes and dreams. Are Windsor Ford fuel injectors connectors EV1 or EV6? All of the ones that I've seen for 351 Windsors and 302 Fords are all EV1. 470 of the wheels is probably close to 600. Yeah, it's probably 578, depending on what transmission he has. If you're going to use total steel gabless rings with boost, you want the tool steel ring set, no cast irons. When referring to injectors, how much power they'll support, are you saying they'll support that power at the crank? Yeah, it's the crank. It's crank horsepower. It's not tire horsepower. For a Fox Celine convertible clone, what swap would be the best? The one that you like. I mean, that's an individual choice. It's like we were talking about earlier. What motor speaks to you? Do you care that you're putting an LS in a? I mean, it's a Celine clone, anyways. It's not like you're restoring something that has to have the original motor in it. So you're already just making a Mustang be better, essentially. Um, you can put in whatever you want, and like I said, for me, an aluminum motor would be really cool because it's lightweight, particularly in a convertible, which is going to be heavy. But if you want to go a 351, as long as it'll fit under the hood, that's good. Versus all forged boost cam 5.3. And for me, I wouldn't do that. I would just take it apart. If it's a motor that has a lot of miles on it, maybe I would put new rings in it. But, a little ball hone and a surface, new head gaskets, ring gap, put this bottom end back together, put heads on it, cam and springs. Particularly if you're going to add a turbo, that'll be good. Cam, what's going on? I know the question's simple, but thanks anyway. Happy to help. I agree. It's nice to see the guys who sweat out a homemade system instead of just buying aftermarket stuff. What do you think about an old school FMU versus a tune? The tune is superior in every way. That being said, because the FMU is really only controlling additional fuel, which you can get that to work fairly well. I mean, a lot of the kits, like we ran that Kenny Bell kit on a 5-liter a few months ago with Mark Sanchez, and it actually did very well. So it had stock injectors on it, ran an FMU. I think that one had 24s because it was a Cobra, but we ran the FMU on it. I don't remember which pump that had. It might have had a stock pump in it. And so jacking up the fuel pressure jacks up. The fuel pressure starts dropping with RPM because of the fuel flow potential of that pump at that pressure. But it produced a nice air fuel curve in the 11s. That worked really good. But the FMU addresses fuel only, and it doesn't address timing. And if you don't take timing away, even though you've supplied the extra fuel, you could still get into detonation issues, even though the thing is like 11-1 or 11-5. So you gotta also, a tune would allow you to take timing away under boost. I had a 91 Club Wagon with a 351. Is that the van? No swap is the best swap. Godzilla swap costs are coming down, luckily, and gives another great option for drag racing. Yeah, I'm going to go try to do stuff with Evan and Brian on Godzilla stuff, so it'll be cool. Chevy for the win. They're lighter. I love my 94 GT. Just sounds amazing with a Magnapacks. It's a Godzilla much taller than a 351 Windsor. I don't know about those dimensions. The LS is better. Bell housing swaps with the modular Ford for Godzilla. Not sure about height, but not much larger than LS or a 351 Windsor. Best engine in car is the one you're happy with. Yeah, I mean, how do you not love a Merkur XR4 Ti? Particularly if it had a 4-valve like Cosworth motor, that would be even better. I did a muffler and valve delete on a 355.3. Is there a way to remove the parameters of the 4V mode through timing? I'm not sure what you're trying to remove. Is what 5.3 is a 4-valve? Eric, I will be on tonight. The big van, extended rear with the fiberglass. Oh, camper top. Church wheelchair car. Okay. E250 base 351 and a 3-speed. And it didn't even have an overdrive in it. I think that 3-speed van motor also had the 2 series rear end gear. I think that's where we got that 241 gear from. 454 Gen 6 big block, my favorite junkyard motor today. I agree, those are good. Pontiac 455 and 400 hard. Yeah, I don't see that in wrecking yards. Even a small gear of 455 Pontiac. Yeah. Godzilla should be hitting the yard pretty soon. Ooh, yeah, beer gut. I agree. An EcoBoost XR4 Ti would be cool. That would be a good swap. All right, Eric. We'll see you later, man. It'd be cool to see a show with you and Jeremy Clarkson and Hammond. We could talk about cars. I don't know. I love Jeremy. I was a huge fan of the original of their original show, and I loved the Stig and all of that stuff was fantastic. I don't know how much those guys know about like actual engine technology. Maybe they do. Four speed was an option, but since it was a fleet vehicle, it was a three. It could go 65, but howled. XR4 Ti and Scorpios are cool. Yep. Got my 99 454 for 500. Pulled it yourself. Nice. That's a score. A sleeper boosted Pinto. Yeah, there's a couple of guys that have Pintos with the SVO motors in them. I think that's cool. 18,000 miles. It's nice. Noise. It's got a couple minutes left. How's our poll? It's interesting. Would you pick up the Ford 351 Windsor over an LS for a swap in your Ford vehicle? 52% said no. 48% said yes. Clarkson would just say more power. Yeah. Yeah, those guys are cool. Top Gear did a lot of really cool stuff. Silverado, I need for the 4-cylinder mode to wait for lower revs and have it hold 8-cylinder. Oh, so it's the DoD stuff. Okay, I get it. Displacement on demand. Did a muffler and valve delete? Yeah, you can turn off DoD in the programming. And I like them getting the celebrities on there in the low price car too, and having them go around. The thing that bothered me as a driver is that some of these guys were subjected to less than ideal conditions. Like if there's standing water on the track, you can't get a time. And I know that on their leaderboard deal that they did, they would put a little R for rain or wet or whatever. But the problem is there's different levels of that. Like if it's pouring rain and you're trying to drive it, that's one thing. If it had rained before and then dried up and then there were just standing puddles in different places, that got the same designation, but that's a different thing. That's a lot faster than driving in pouring rain. And so, it's just luck of the draw and where they're testing at that has a lot of weather there. So a lot of the guys, I think didn't get a fair shake. And I like when they brought like Formula One drivers on there when they bought, because Schumacher was a Stig for a while, and when they brought Lewis Hamilton and these guys on there, and Button and all these older Formula One guys, now older, and how fast and how serious they would take it, for a tenth and a hundredth take, because that's what would separate them in that little car, and it makes me wonder how repeatable that car was. Was that car for each lap? What was the car itself within a tenth, even though they would be, because they're, these guys are amazing. Ford belongs in a Ford, and Chevy in a Chevy, and Mopar in a Mopar. Anything can be made fast, no matter the brand. Someone will always be faster. Just be happy. Yeah, and see, you can decide that that's the way that you would want it, but other guys decide, hey, look, I'll put whatever in whatever, and it doesn't matter, and that's all good too. It's all of it's good. A 351 Windsor with modern engine management. Yep, any sort of standalone deal, even a factory, EQ4 that you can go in and program and manipulate, as long as you could give it the right air, fuel, and timing, and then also that you're not restricting it with, like, if you have a stock mass air meter and you put a lot of motor and you're still trying to feed it with a stock mass air meter, it just doesn't flow well enough for that. 80s LT1 versus 80s 351. Even What LT1 did they make in the 80s? Are you talking about a 90s LT1 maybe? UK weather is just bad. Yeah, I mean, it would be like them setting up shop in Seattle or something and then wondering why it rains every day that they're trying to test. Oh, Goodwood was rained out too. Matt LeBlanc killed it in the rain a few times. And you know who else is a really good driver is Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise gets around really well. It'd be nice to adapt an LS management to a 351. You can read Ben Collins' book. Yeah, Ben was also Stiggy. If you read Ben Collins' book, you get the idea that it was never meant to be fair or competitive. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. I don't know how you would do that. I have this discussion with guys that we get together for some of these events, and then invariably a bunch of us will go over to some local, indoor go-kart track, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I killed everybody." I'm like, "You realize that?" And a lot of guys don't realize this. A lot of guys are fairly fast in these go-karts, and they can, if we all go out, this guy wins, and then this guy wins, and then this guy wins. And unless you've raced, you don't realize like what these variables are. And I'm like, you understand that all of these carts are not the same. The drivers might not be the same also. I said, but all of these carts are not the same. If you go out and drive all of these carts, the variation in lap times, if you were to be able to maximize those, if you were one of these 14-year-old kids or whatever that weighs 75 pounds and goes out and just like kills it. I said, if you could go out and do everything that cart is capable of, that there's a variation even on a short track like this, like by a second and a half of the fastest cart from the slowest cart. So if the carts vary by that much, and you're talking about a differentiation of tenths between the group of guys, because all the guys know how to drive. I said, and you're talking about a variation of tenths between the guys, the guy that gets the fast cart is going to win. The one guy might be a little bit faster than the other. Maybe a guy races better than another guy, all these things. But if there's a second and a half variation in cart, there's no amount of driving that's going to change that. The other guy would have to be a second and a half slower than the other guy in the bad cart. And so that's just not going to happen. But those guys don't realize that. They prance around like, I'm the fastest guy in the world. Like, no, you have the best cart, or I had the best cart, and then I look like a hero. It's not because I'm that much better than everybody. I'm not better than everybody in this group by that much. It's because I had a better vehicle, and they just don't understand that. What does nostalgia drag racing class mean to me? I don't understand the question. I like, I think everyone should go see a Top Fuel car, but that's not my favorite form of racing, though. I like racing where you can, and this includes, road racing and drag racing, all that, and would include NASCAR, although I don't watch a lot of NASCAR anymore. I like being able to see what the cars are and being able to identify the different cars. Like I want an El Camino to look like an El Camino, or a Chevelle to look like a Chevelle, like the Fast series for drag racing, those kinds of things. I like that stuff. I like being able to, if you were watching NASCAR, I liked seeing a Torino Talladega, or a Plymouth Superbird, or those kinds of things. Same thing in Trans Am racing. Like I like seeing and that's why I like the historic stuff. I like seeing a Boss 302 and a Z28 and a Javelin or whatever. I like the differences in cars. I don't want them all to be the same. I don't think that that's the way racing should be. A 91730 should look different than a Ferrari version of that, and so I like those kinds of cars. Speaking of 351, did you see Vice Grip's garage got a Pantera from Canada? That's cool. 2019 GT350R, no motor or trans. Richard, do you like the 5.3 as well as this case, or do I have an all-in 6-liter with ported heads, turbo either way? Any of those are fine. If the bigger the motor is, the better the starting point, because it's going to make more power. It's going to spool the turbo up. But if I had a choice between an aluminum 5.3 and an iron 6-liter, I probably would pick the aluminum 5.3 just because I like handling and braking and stuff. I think a better comparison for swap candidates would be a Coyote versus an LS. I think we will see more and more Coyote swaps into Fox Mustangs. That's possible, but a number of Coyote swaps versus the number of LS swaps is like 1,000 to 1, or maybe more than that. Coyotes have always been, they're good motors. I like them a lot, and they can make a lot of power. They're just not nearly as popular as an LS. They're more expensive. They're more complex. They're bigger dimensionally. They don't fit as well and stuff. And so therefore they're not, they're not readily available. Coyote Mustangs you don't see in wrecking yards. You do see some trucks probably. I've never seen. I saw one in the wrecking yards that I go to, but the day that it got there, it was immediately pulled out and it was gone. Whereas you can go and find a dozen or more LS things. And so I think it's just not going to be anywhere near the scale of popularity between a Coyote and an LS. Had an XR4 Ti with a 363 RB block, an R block, and standalone management system. Now it's in the Miata. Cool. How much more power do the AFR 185 heads make over AFR 165 on a small block Ford 302? On a stock one, probably not any more power. The cart with bad compression and wheel bearing is never going to win. And if you look at these carts, if you look at the level, the dramatic level of different driving abilities, you get these guys that stuff them into the tire barriers and into other cars and stuff. And so you have some carts have like bent steering arms. So you're driving on the road, you're like, that arm's bent. This thing doesn't turn one way very well. And so the handling is dramatically compromised. I've gone to these tracks and pointed these out to guys. I'm like, dude, come on. They're like, yeah, no, we got to fix that. Because you got one wheel straight and then you got one that's, got a bunch of toe in or toe out, depending on which way it went. One of the best battery wins. Yeah, a lot of them are electric. Some of the ones that we were doing were still gas powered. 100 pounds of driver, huge. Yeah, that's what I was saying. If you get some young kid that has amazing reflexes and has driven these carts 1,000 times and knows the track inside and out, and he weighs nothing, and he's really fast and super aggressive and has all the things that you need to be a cart driver, and then you get a guy that's 150 pounds and not 100 pounds or 200 pounds or whatever. That's forever in a cart. Very passionate about go-kart racing. I do like go-kart driving. I can't believe I've done some races. We went to a karting school out here in the Inland Empire when I lived in Southern California, and we went out and did this. And he goes, "Hey, you get around pretty good. You're kind of right there with me." And this was the instructor guy. I said, I've done a lot of racing. I said, so I understand what this is. And I said, I'm finally getting the feel for what this cart is. And for, I like call it being inch perfect. And so I can get to the point where now I can really try to whittle off the tenths and hundredths or whatever. And so it was fun. He goes, well, I want you to come drive. And so I drove a couple races with his team or whatever, and but hadn't done go-kart racing. Like, we've done lots of stuff where we go out to these kinds of things and to these kart tracks and stuff like Adams and go out as a big group with the guys from AccuFab and West Tech and stuff and go have fun. And all that's great. But I hadn't done any real racing. And I can't believe how sore I was from driving. I had bruises on my ribs and stuff. It's hard work. What defines a nostalgia car used for drag racing? I don't know. You probably would have a better idea than that. Period correct equipment. Both the Coyote and the LS sound like shite compared to small book Fords and small book Chevys. Silver State Classic cars are great for that reason. Yeah, they're just cars. They're not. I mean, they do bring some race cars out there, but most of them are street cars that are hopped up. Factory engines used or aftermarket parts for modern vintage only, LS and other engine swap flows. Also, the 4V can be fully forged aluminum block. Brought the Coyote. TVRs are the best sounding V8s. They did have some serious ones. Coyotes were definitely late to the party and are more expensive, harder to find. I emailed you back this morning. I'm interested in the dual plane LS carb intake. Somebody just sent me an email and I think wanted a few different intake manifolds. So we'll see. There are a lot of Coyotes in the fleet F-150 starting to hit the wrecking yards. Also, a genuine Coyote loses the rods over 800. Really? The early Coyote has rod problems? I see. That's all new to me. I say only factory iron or aluminum heads used. No modern two steps. Any urge to herp an inland Taipei? I would try to catch any kind of snake. I think I don't think that I would have an issue with that, especially if I have a stick. That's not that. I don't think it's that big a deal. The problem is that the consequences are very dire. Just like with a, that snake doesn't really interest me. I mean, I think it'd be cool to go see that. The venomous snake that I would like to go catch would be a king cobra. I think that would be cool because they're big. I mean, 10, 12 feet, and they could get like 15 or 18 feet, I think. Again, the odds of seeing those would be difficult. But king cobras, I think, are fairly common. And like they're venomous and they're big. It's like it's like a trifecta. Wouldn't the 351 Windsor weight rev better and keep the front down and power the ground better? On what? On you're talking about a road race car? No, you don't want more weight. You want less weight. Jeff wants a nostalgia drag race for No Name Nationals. It's insane how well those tiny tires grip. Get your tire pressure right. Yeah, there's a lot to balancing and setting it up. Force Engineering out of Michigan just did 10 seconds and a half mile. Largest venomous snake. Yeah, the king cobra is. And they inject their venom isn't on the scale of stuff, the strength isn't overwhelming, but they have a lot of it. So I think that they have enough to kill an elephant. Is there a certain car that you would like 351 408 stroker in? For me, is there one? I think if I was going to have a 408 stroker, I would like to have it in like a Torino Talladega or something like that. Wide tires' real advantage is heat management and ear control. Is it rear control that you're talking about? Not overall grip if you look at the actual physics. Well, if you increase the contact patch, there is more grip there. Oh, wear control. Okay. Yeah. If you can put all of the greater contact patch, if you can utilize all of the contact patch, you can get better handling. Just like the big tire and the small tire, guys. The stroker Leno put in a 67 Galaxy. It was beautiful. 427. Did he? If it's a 67 Galaxy, I would think that would be an FE based deal. But maybe he put a Windsor in there. I don't know. I haven't seen it. I like those Galaxies though. On that note, it is time to go, but I will be back tonight. Tonight.